So 10 years ago today is an event that, whether I like it or not, even 10 years later, it's shaped my life and pushed my life in different directions. And it continues to define my life no matter how much I try to get away from it. And the event I'm talking about is basically like a mushroom cloud in my life. Just everything, the closer to the time frame I was to that incident, the more things were damaged, but even feel like years, generations later, you can feel the fallout from it. And what I'm talking about is on this very day, 10 years ago, is a day I was riding a bicycle in Chicago and I got T-boned by a reckless, I would say even, I'm pretty sure he was drunk, driver in the middle of a day, um, turning down the wrong way down a one-way street. And it just, like the physical injuries were pretty severe, but also the emotional mental trauma was far more severe. I just didn't realize it at the time. And if we want to talk about the physical injuries, it pretty much decimated my entire left side. Um, Specifically, my shoulder, I just destroyed the joint, I destroyed the ligaments, I destroyed a lot of the muscle and tissue around it. Basically, everything except the skin and maybe a little bit of subcutaneous tissue around it. But my left arm was just inoperable. I mean, it just didn't work. And I knew I was in trouble as soon as I got hit, and as soon as I felt the cold flashes through my body. I can still remember it quite clearly. Um, and that I'm trying to fit this in 10 minutes, but that accident reverberated through my life for the past 10 years. And just now I feel like I'm starting to walk back a lot of the damage mentally and emotionally. And I'm going to try to fit this all in about 10 minutes. Um, and sometimes, like, stories and narratives aren't neat and tidy. And they very much mirror life. And life's a messy, uncomfortable experience. But I really wanted to share this, not as a way of kind of as therapy for me, or not as a way of get over my trauma, but just to share a slice of life that you may not encounter the same kind of adversity, but we all encounter adversity. And I often think how we respond to diversity, or not diversity, adversity, how we respond to adversity really defines us. And I've always felt that way, but I've been trying to define myself in different ways for the past 10 years. And I haven't realized until this past year that, and I think I've just been trying to define myself all wrong, or I still haven't really fully understood it. And the easiest way I can explain what happened with this accident, and if you have questions about the specifics of it, I'm really happy to share it with you. All you have to do is ask questions, but I'm trying to keep this as concise as possible for my viewers. So, really, with that accident, I would say that I was a musician at the time. I've always been a musician. As far as I can recall, I've been a musician. That's been my identity. I've also had this all kind of alter ego, or the side identity of being an athlete, which when you are a musician, it's kind of an anomaly, right? Usually think athletes are the antithesis of healthy, active people. And you know what? For a time after college, I definitely was a little bit of that cliche. I never fell too far down the wormhole, but I definitely put on some weight, definitely ate some bad food, definitely drank a little bit too much, definitely did not live a healthy lifestyle. But when I moved to Chicago, I've been living on the road doing various tours. I moved to Chicago in 2009. I was a little bit unhealthy, but I spent those next several years kind of reinventing myself, always saying being a musician, but I started pursuing a dream I've always had of being an Ironman triathlete. And for those of you who don't know, an Ironman is a race where you swim 2.4 miles, then you ride 112 miles on a bike, and then you run 26.2 miles, marathon, and that's the race. And that's always something I've wanted to do. And I started training for that in about 2011. And it was going to take me a couple of years just to be able to get to the point where I could do an Ironman successfully. So in 2013, I had like built up this identity of being an athlete, being a professional musician. And all the musicians I know admired me and looked up to me because they're like, "Oh, that's the crazy athlete, dude. He's ripped. He's in great shape." And all my athlete friends were like, "Oh, yeah, that's a rock superstar. That's he's the musician. He's the cool guy." And those things made me feel like somebody. They gave me identity. And I think I've always had some kind of low self-esteem, or there's been something a little bit off about my self-worth. And probably why I chose to do things like become a musician or pursue extreme sports, because I was doing things other people couldn't do, other people dreamed about doing, and that gave me a certain amount of validation. That gave me a certain amount of credibility, of worthiness that I didn't think I deserved. And this could be a whole nother topic. But really, essentially, that crash represented, after when I got in that crash, in an instant, everything I worked my entire life for just vanished. Literally. The skills I had acquired as a musician, I no longer had those skills. I could no longer play. I could no longer perform or work. What I had built up as an athlete, I could no longer do. So everything that made me special and unique, and what I felt made me worthy of, I would say, even love and attention from other people and affection, was just gone in an instant. And that was a moment where everything about my identity was stripped. And also, because of that, I was a musician. And I've never been really great with money. I've never been great with security. And I've always just thought that, okay, if I want to play music, I have to walk the walk. And sometimes, walking the walk means you have to maybe go without money, or you have to bypass financial security in order to pursue a dream. And that was also part of the allure of being a musician for me, because like I'm so into this that I'm willing to go out on a limb, and I was. But when I had that accident, like everything was taken from me. My identity was taken from me, but then everything I'd worked for in my life slowly started going away from me. I didn't really have any financial security at the time, and I had no way of working after that. I was in such bad shape physically that I couldn't even walk my dog. Like, not like I didn't have the ability to walk my dog. For months, I was in such bad shape that, driving a car was out of the question, but even riding a bus, public transportation, was out of the question, because it was too dangerous, because my body was just so damaged that I could risk further injuring it. So I'm living in Chicago. Suddenly I have no job. I have very little resources to fall back on. And I just have no identity. So, the first 2 weeks after that accident, it actually wasn't that bad. I felt amount of hope and amount of resiliency, because everyone was giving me well wishes. Everyone was supporting me, and it was great. I felt loved. But then after that, after those 2 or 3 weeks, people slowly start going back to their normal lives, because life has to go on. They can't center their lives around you. And I wish life could have gone on normally for me, but it did not. I felt like I was left alone, and I wasn't angry at people for that, but I was angry and sad and scared. And I think I only really let myself cry or mourn or grieve at that. Maybe there was one time, it was after I had last of my surgeries. My mother came out for a week to help me out. And, of course, she didn't want to leave, but she had to go back to her normal life as well. So I hugged her, and I tried to stay strong, and I didn't cry in front of her, I don't think. And then when she left, I remember specifically, I can see it in my head, that spot on my stairs where I sat down, and I cried for a good 10 minutes, because I was so scared and so vulnerable and alone. And I had that cry, And then I just wiped the tears away, and then I said, all right, you're done with that. Not because I felt any shame in feeling that sadness or fear, but there was no room for it because I switched on to survival mode. I had to find a way to keep going. I took those feelings and I stuffed them inside of a box because I had no other choice. So I stuffed those feelings inside of a box, and that afternoon listed my car on Craigslist and I sold it so I could have food for the next few weeks. And that's pretty much set the tone for the next year of my life. I had to do what I could do to survive. I couldn't even talk about this on social media or in person. My lawyers are like, man, that's your medical bills are going to be seven figures, and an insurance company is going to look to poke any holes in your story and see if they can not pay that. So keep your mouth shut. Sound legal advice, but horrible for emotions. So I really didn't talk about it, and I was so scared and alone. I didn't know what to do. I was also in a toxic and abusive relationship because I couldn't leave that because who else was going to take care of me? I couldn't even drive a car. I couldn't even walk to the store, man. So, um, and that relationship got to the point this person had some emotional issues and also had some alcohol issues and some rage control issues. And long story short, she ended up taking some of them out on me and ended up, and this is a whole nother story, but ended up breaking my right hand, and I got a compound fracture in that. And when you get a compound fracture, it means the bone is exposed. And anytime the bone is exposed, especially outdoors where I was in a gravel parking lot at the time, you run serious risk of infection and an amputation. So I had to be hospitalized and be on like round the clock antibiotics so I make sure I could save that hands. And then I picked up a nasty infection or condition. If you're curious, just Google C. diff. And that's kind of when your body's just cleared out so much from antibiotics that you have none of the good bacteria in your stomach to be able to process food. So basically, I was pissing out of my ass for a good while, and I was in some serious, I had some serious health risks going on at that time. And that was really indicative of that whole year for me. And, of course, I got the restraining order, and I just picked up whatever pieces I could, and I found ways to survive. And they were telling me, doctors and everyone at the hospital were saying, man, it's going to be a good 18 months for you to get back to normal activities, let alone after that, you're going to have to spend some time being able to train again and being able to do the things you want to do as an athlete. And again, I never felt sorry for myself. I didn't allow myself to, but I just got angry and I stuffed all that down and I approached my physical rehab like it was my job, like I was an athlete. Like I'm talking crazy strict diet, crazy strict sleep. There was nothing else in my world except just doing that rehab. And for lack of better terms, my rehab was miraculous. It wasn't by chance, it was by design because of my effort. Uh, and what was really telling was that I never went to my last day of physical therapy when you hit the goodbye gong and all the physical therapists hug you and everyone in the trauma wing claps and you inspire other people, because I didn't want that. I didn't want to feel good about anything because that was just a little hump. I wanted to be a freaking Iron Man. And so I rehabbed and I trained angry that next year. I wasn't angry at anybody, but it was really just my sadness and grief that had nowhere to go. So I put that thing I stuffed inside that box, I took it out and used it as logs on the fire, and I burned that thing when I was training. And sure enough, I did an Ironman that year, or a year later. I think it was about 14 months. And I thought that was going to be the moment where everything was cool and life was going to go on. But then after that, I felt, man, I got to do another Ironman. So I did another Ironman and then another. And I'm like, I want to qualify for world championships. I want to be a pro. I'm going to move out to Colorado and try and train with the pros there. And go qualify for the world championships. I really didn't have a plan, but it's just like I just couldn't let go of this for some reason. And I think maybe it's because I need to make this crash all make sense. And all the meanwhile, I could pick up sticks again, but and I wanted to play music, but I'm like, I'm too far away from that, and I'm too far down this Iron Man path. I got to keep going. So I just kind of put it away, and I sold all my instruments, sold all my recording gear, and all there was for me was I was training, trying to find a way to make this accident make sense, trying to find a way to process this trauma and this grief. And during all the while, I started working as I started teaching group fitness classes. Then I got more certifications, and I started being a coach, and then I was a personal trainer. And all the while, I was like also interested in injuries and rehab because of everything I'd gone through. So I started going back to school for that. And my opportunities in Colorado weren't quite there. I had no plan. I was still training, but I got lured back to Chicago because I got a job back there working in fitness and just finding ways to continue my education, continue my training. And then all of a sudden, racing stopped because COVID happened. I hadn't been playing music, but I had been training my ass off. I'd been studying my ass off. And so instead of like, I still trained through COVID, but I also kind of found this new world where I was able to make a lot of money starting to do almost like this rehab like service. And I was like, man, I maybe should just go back to school to be a doctor. And I started going down that and exploring that path. And I started making a lot of money. And I started being really successful working in rehab. All the while, music is on the back shelf. But that getting that money and getting those accolades, it was fulfilling, man. It was like giving me. I felt like I was somebody again. I felt like I had an identity. Um, I mean, just the thought of being a doctor. It's a lot different than being a drummer. And people, they say, oh, yeah, I guess so. I mean, really, like, if your kid comes home and says, I'm going to marry a drummer versus I'm going to marry a doctor, I think everyone's going to have a little bit different response. You know, it's a humorous way of looking at things. But for me, I was like, okay, I was getting credibility. I was getting respect. And I was feeling good about myself. And COVID was actually a cool time. I met somebody. I fell in love with that person. We were just like, screw it, why not? She was living in Colorado. I was living in Chicago. Let's buy a house together in Nashville. Let's move in together, and I can start a physical therapy, service for musicians, because who understands both of those? I do. And it was because I thought my musical career was done, or it's just like I was afraid to admit it, but like I had neglected it too long, and it was too far, and I was too far down this other path to turn around. And so we moved to Nashville. We got a house, and I continued with my education, and I started building my business slowly, very slowly. And I started withdrawing and detaching from my partner. And I had been withdrawing and detaching from my friends and my family for years. And they probably thought I was mad at them, that they did something wrong. And I was mad at myself, and I didn't realize it and I didn't process my trauma because I wasn't playing music. And I was too afraid to start again. And I started sitting in and taking some gigs as under a guise of I'm doing this to network, to meet clients so they can come and work with me and I can help them with their injuries. And I think part of that was really genuine. But also, I almost felt like an alcoholic in the sense that, or a drug addict in the sense that if they're in an environment where people are always doing it, they're going to want to get drawn back in. But instead, for me, it was music. And I was around musicians, and I really wanted to be back in there. But I lacked the self-confidence. I don't think I could play anymore. I was so far down this other road that I was like, I'm too far along to turn back now. Music's gone. Maybe I can do it as a hobby or for fun, but I don't have to do it on a serious level. And the further I got away from it and the further I got into this world, further I detached from everyone, including my partner, and I really withdrew from people, and I couldn't I was didn't think I was good enough as a musician. And I would tell other people, I mean, I play drums, but I'm really this. And that was my way of saying, I'm afraid that you think that I'm not good as a musician. So here's another way that I am valid if you think that I'm some kind of bum on the drums. Um, and it was eating me up. And I was getting angrier and angrier every day and withdrawing. And I didn't know why. She didn't know why. Didn't know why. Other people didn't know why. I was just miserable. And long story short, she was like, you're kind of being a dick. You need to get some help or I'm going to have to leave you. And I tried a few times. Nobody stuck. And then I ended up working with a sports psychologist of all people. And after about 2 sessions, the psychologist was like, everything you're saying just doesn't make sense to me. Sounds like you want to play music. Just play it. And he didn't say it that way, but he framed it in a way where I'm like, oh, okay. So I jumped my both feet into music. I'm still working with clients right now that I've started with in Nashville because I want to get them over the hump because I really care about the work. But for the past 10 years, I was denying a huge part of who I was, which is a musician. And I think stuffing that down, all that pain, that disappointment, anger, and never addressing it, that I paid a price for that. And I was in a coma for 10 years. I was blacked out. I was not myself. And I was too afraid to start becoming a musician again because I never played country music because it really wasn't my thing. That was like a whole nother, I'd had to start over again, and I didn't want to because I already started over again once before as an athlete and then trying to be a physical therapist. And I'm like, I'm too far down. I can't turn around again. I've gone too far down this road to turn around. But that's exactly what I did. And I was afraid of doing that. And this was several months ago. I'm still fairly new in this venture right now. And it's like I'm waking up from a bad dream. I tell people it feels like the Shawshank Redemption, where this unfortunate thing that unfairly happens to me. And I get sent to this place where I go away and I'm exposed to all these other horrible things. And I'm slowly losing myself. And I spend lose years of my life and crawl through shit and grime and mud and finally come out the other end and just breathe and just be like, I'm here. I've arrived. And that's what it feels like playing music again. It feels like I'm finally back to myself. I can finally start apologizing to people who I shut out because I was just so uncomfortable and so upset that I lost to music. And I wasn't letting myself be myself. And I don't I could regret things, but it doesn't do any good. I'm really happy to be playing music again, and I'm slowly discovering myself, and it's like, it gives me this whole new perspective on life and music. Do I have any advice to offer? I mean, I don't know. There's no way to neatly tie this package because it's messy, just like life. I'm glad I started back into music again. It's like giving me new life. I can finally start saying, I'm a musician. Yeah, I'm great at what I do. You should hire me. We should play together. I'm really good I love what I do. It's who I am. I finally just kind of this is my identity, and I tried to deny it so long, and I ignored it, and all of it just manifested in different ways. And now that I'm just finally allowing myself to be myself and play music, it feels like a weight's lifted off my shoulders. And it's taken me 10 years to get to this path. And I'm sure 10 years from now, I'll have a lot different perspectives that I didn't have at this moment. I'm not saying that I'm an example or anything of do what I do or don't do what I do. But this is just a slice of life. It's complicated. We all have our different paths, and we all see these things on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and everything is in these neatly packaged, I am this, I am this. And like we're branding ourselves. And maybe I was trying to do that, but like I finally just, after several months, of I'm just several months into this, like, I said, okay, I'm not doing this other job that was making me money. I'm going to go be a musician. Of course, it's tough and complicated, but I haven't been this happy in a while. I finally, like, feel like I am myself, and every day is just like a new adventure. So that's a big part of my story. If the story connected with you, or if you found it interesting, I kindly ask you to like, subscribe, or comment. If someone else is in a bad spot and you think maybe hearing that other people go through these things would help them, please send this to them. If you have questions, if you want to know more, please shoot me a message. Again, I'm not doing this as a way to process my trauma per se, but as a way to say that, like, man, we all have complicated paths, and you're not alone out there and being confused and overwhelmed and scared about trying new things, because hell, I am. But like, what's the worst that could happen? Someone says, no, I don't want you on a gig. It's, I mean, that's what I'm telling myself, and I'm just putting myself out there. Like, no one's going to notice unless I say something. Say, hey, here I am. This is my story. So that's a big part of my story. Today marks a huge milestone for me. That, like, it's been 10 years, and I finally got back to where I started. And I'm really excited to see where the next part of the journey goes. So if you watched this far, thank you so much for watching. 27 minutes? God damn it!